Okay, so now let's actually code along and implement local storage into our code base. So at this point, anytime I'm implementing something new based on the way we've been coding, I'd want to think about a module. And storage.js sure makes sense to me. Sometimes the hardest thing in programming is naming things. It's actually a joke that's really true. So in this case, I would create a new one called storage.js. Okay. And I would think about what would go in there. Well, what we're really going to be dealing with in storage.js is something we have over in global, which is part of why I actually considered putting this code into global. I could, there is some pluses and minuses of doing it that way, but for now I'm going to go ahead and I know this breaks code, so just know that when you do this, over in storage, I'm going to just bring this over for a minute. Okay, and we know that when we export, right, so we kind of set up, okay, CFP data is going to be in here. For now, it's the only thing, but what we want to do now is we actually want to write two functions. One to save to local storage, okay, and one to get from local storage. So we want to save it. Now, the question would be, and this is part of what I'll probably end up with a challenge for this, and I'll walk you through kind of how to implement it, and then think about where else we'd want to do these functions, right? So let's first start by doing function. Okay, now save ls, save local storage. Now we could say to, we could say, but it's just more words, right? If you want to, use to, it's fine. If you want something else, come up with it. So when we save to local storage, and it's a function, right? In this case, what do we need that function to do? Now we know we have CFP data here, but we'll end up using this function to populate what that CFP data is. Okay, every time we update, every time we get user input, we'll want to do this. So what I'd want to do is set up a variable called serialized, okay, array, because it's an array of objects. And I'm just giving it a name for this function, not to use everywhere else in my code. And I would say JSON.stringify, okay? And what am I going to stringify is I'm going to stringify that CFP data. Okay? Now, in this case, the way we've written it here, right? Notice I'm not passing it in. I absolutely could, and I probably should, but notice it's within the module itself. Okay, so when I call this, I do want to pass in a reference to that array. But, and this is where, but let's just go ahead and complete this and then we'll come back and look at that. So now, once we've serialized whatever's in there, when the user inputs it, then we're going to call that local storage dot set item. And this is where we give it the key, right? This is what we say. Here's the key. And again, your editor's trying to help you here. And I'd call it CFP data, or CFP. Now, comma is, now it's asking, what do you want to what do you want to store, right? So I would say a serialized array. Now, I could say serialized array of objects, because that's really what it is. And if you want to give it that name, you can. But that's really all we'd need to do. Okay, now when are we going to do this though? Right, so if we set the variable here, we serialize it, and we set the array. Then we want to think about where would we do it in our code. So I'd go back to main, and I would look inside of main, and I would go, wouldn't it make sense before you render the data that you actually go ahead and save it? Because now you could actually do it here, because this is the exact space or the exact code that actually updates that empty array the first time we run it. We could do it there, but I am, and I said this before, probably going to end up combining these at some point. So what I would do is, once the control comes back here, I know I have an updated array. I would want to call I'd want to call storage save, right? So if I want to do that, then in main, I'm going to have to do what? I'm going to have to import, right? Save ls local storage, right? Save local, and again, 2 might be a good one to do, from storage. Okay. Now the reason it looks like this is over here, right? I haven't done this. I haven't actually included it. And again, your editor is trying to give you little visual clues for, right? It's like import save ls from storage. I'm just making sure. Save. Oh, yeah. So the reason it's like this now is I haven't used it yet. So I'm like, why isn't it there? So save ls, right? And this is where we'd want to pass it a reference to. Now, it's kind of interesting here because we're actually passing it a reference to the place in our code where we're setting this up, right, where we're defining it here. So we could pull this out and put it just in main or leave it in globals, but I kind of like to organize things that make sense together. Okay, so we still want to have that reference passed in. Okay, so think about that. So what we've done, we've imported it from local storage, right? We're calling save here, and then we're passing it. But remember, the reference here to CFP data, right, is still just what's in volatile memory. All we're doing in our function so far, is saving it. So we're not done, we're only doing half of it, but let's see if that half works and if we have any issues. Okay. Oh, right. Yeah, so that threw an error in global. So in global, I'd have to get rid of this. Forgot to. Here. Okay. Comma. This is actually why I ended up almost considering just leaving it there, because there's many times we're going to need, not many times, but okay, let's see now. Good, does not provide. Oh, right. Right, here too as well. So right now, at least in main, there's only one thing coming in from globals, which is okay. Let's see. Okay, good. So I think that's good because it makes you, and it made me connect all the dots that make sure when I set up a new module, because this is just now getting way used to doing things in a new way. So now how do we test it? Okay, so we'd come over here, right, and we'd see, and actually I could set a breakpoint, but let's just see if it works. Right. Oh, I love errors because they always make you think, right? So when I imported, right, when I imported this, I forgot to import the data reference itself, which I'm going to absolutely need in here, right? Absolutely. So I should have thought about that, but that's why you test your code as well. So all I'd have to do here is, now I have that reference to that empty object the first time around, right? Great, it's here. Now the question is, did it get into local storage? And that's where I would go over to app, and I'd go here. CFP data is there, look at that, and it's even here. That's awesome, right? So now we know it's in local storage. And you might think, and it's a good thing to try, to refresh the page. It's still in local storage, but it's not here. Why is it not in our page? Because when would we, right? And what would, and how would we then take advantage of that local storage on refresh? Now we'll talk about it in terms of the CRUD operation. So when we're refreshing the page, if we do have something in local storage, right, we're reading it back from local storage. So how do we do that? All right, now we need our other function. Okay, let's just go to storage here, and now let's write the companion one. So this would be, right, get ls. Again, type it, pass in the reference. Okay, get ls. Now what are we going to do here is a few more steps. We're going to again define a new, right, and I'm going to call it retrieved. Is that right? Retrieved array. Okay. Now is going to be equal to local storage dot get item, and then I reference that key. Okay, so this is me going out to local storage and saying, hey, give me whatever is in there. Now there is a chance, and this is what you want to think about, there is a chance here that there's nothing in there. So what you'd want to do is write some conditional code here to say, how do we handle this? Because, right, if I clear this and I run this line, right, then there's going to be nothing there that comes back. And in that case, what would I want to do is what you want to think about. Again, if there's nothing here, that means there's no saved data. What do I want to return? Or what do I want? And the answer is an empty array. Okay. So this is the logic. So if retrieved array not equal to null. Now, we haven't really talked about null in this class, right? So you could do, right, what is null in JavaScript, right? Empty or unknown value. So you're basically saying, hey, when you try to go out and get, now get is the name of the function, but we're really saying get item is the method. Then if what you bring back is null, in that case, what do we want to do, right? Or actually, I'm saying is not null. We could flip it around and say, is it equal to null? And then what we'd want to do is return an empty array. But in this case, I'm sorry, I didn't say it right. We're saying if it's not equal to null, meaning there's something in there, right, when we bring it back. In that case, we want to return json.parse. Because remember, this is your companion, because what's in local storage is not in a form that we can understand in JavaScript. And we want to parse that retrieved array. And we want to return it. Okay. Else, and this is important, else what? So if it is equal to null, then what do we want to return? We want to return an empty array. Okay, so look at that code for a minute and think about it. Because we want to say, okay, go get it. What is it equal or not equal to null? Meaning there's something that came back. If something came back, then wherever I called this, okay, then return that parsed value so I can use it in my code. But if there's nothing, if it was equal to null, then just return an empty array. Now, how would I then get this, right? All I'd have to do here is call get ls. Okay, now in this case, I don't need the reference. I didn't actually need the reference before. So when this module loads, the first thing it's going to do is run that. And you might think, so first just kind of wrap your head around that. So when in main, I'm importing this, okay, from storage, I'm importing this. As soon as I do that and it goes over to storage and it actually runs this, executes this line that returns either the parsed from local storage or an empty array to here, so that that's now available to me wherever I need CFP data. Now, think about that. We also want to, because now we might wonder why we also want to export get ls if the only place we're doing it is here. And that's a little hint that there are other places we're going to need to. But first we want to see if this works, right? So the question would be, right, how do we use this? Well, we're already doing it by placing this in storage and having that be loaded from here, meaning loaded from your main, imported from your main to execute. Okay, now we're not done. We're saving it. We're not running retrieve here, we're running it in storage, okay, in the storage module. So now let's see what happens over here. Okay, so we know, do we still have, yeah, we still have some local data. So if we do it again, or sorry, we still have some local storage data. Let's do S so we can see the difference. Okay. Oh, we do have two. Interesting, right? Which would be exactly what we'd want. We'd want to have two because there was already one there from before, right? Now the question is it persistent? Right? So if we hit refresh, they go away from the render, but they're still setting in local storage. So how do we fix that? Where would we use these functions in our code whenever the page, because where in our code, right, does a refresh, what executes on a page refresh? And the answer is everything that we have either run on main, because it's the thing we have in the index file, and that we're importing. Okay. So everything, but what specific thing creates this output? Because notice, right, now I have 3. And the answer is render table. Where are we calling render table right now? We're only calling render table when we submit something. So this is your challenge, okay? Where would we, now I'm not saying remove it from here, but where else could we use render table? And then I want you to attempt, right, also handling if when we hit edit, it went back in here, which is awesome, right? So when we come here, that's working okay, right? Or is it? Or is it? Okay, so if I hit refresh, again they go away, but that one change that I made, and maybe what I need to do is actually make that more clear, because I did change the data. Okay, so let's go to this last one and we'll change this to new. New, new, right? Large. Submit. It's here, but when we refresh, we know it's gone. I'm adding another one just so you can see it. Okay. All right. I'll show you on the back side, but so you have 2. So let's hit delete. Does delete work? So this is S. Delete works there. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4. And when we hit refresh, we know we got to fix that. So that's your first challenge. It's not actually deleting, right? So whatever it is we need to do, we also need to do it on the edit and delete. So that's a challenge, right? So so here's what you want to do. And actually I think I'll make sure, because one thing, it gets hard for me to see this. So So before you start on the challenge, you're coding the JS, right, the storage JS, before you're coding challenge. So submit that code first, and now attempt the coding challenge. The coding challenge, to be clear, is to figure out how to, when you refresh, how do you then render what you know is in local storage. You have some stuff. Why isn't it rendering? Where do you update your code to do that? And then also, right, when you submit, we know it is rendering all the data. And look, submit actually is where we're at. It is working. But on your edit and your delete, they are not. Okay, give that a shot, and then I'll give you a commit for that.